This is a special episode of CRM Audio focused on mobility with Scott LaFonte and Joel Lindstrom. This episode is sponsored by Ingenious. Ingenious Connector Enterprise integrates your telephone system into Microsoft Dynamics 365 and CRM for increased phone agent productivity. Features like screen pop, click to dial, and call logging enable efficient customer service and a comprehensive view of caller interactions. Check out their website at ingenious.com. That's INGENIUS.com. We thank Ingenious for sponsoring this special episode of CRM Audio, the Dynamics 365 podcast. So this is a special episode that not a normal episodes that we do, but thought there's been a lot of changes on the mobile front lately, and we don't have enough for an ongoing regular show about mobile, but thought we'd do a little special episode just about mobile. And so we got Scott LaFonte from At Your Service on here with us. What is this big show you're going to be presenting at?
The Resco.Next conference in March. So there's a lot of excitement around new developments within the Resco platform and mobility. In particular, how it is tied quite frequently to field service, but it can be used for a lot more. But I believe this conference is focused quite heavily on the field service arena, just because it's become so invaluable to organizations with field technicians, and having that capability to work offline or in remote, desolate areas, and be able to then sync back that data later on. So it's going to be pretty exciting.
What's your background with Resco? When did you get started with it, and what kind of deployments have you typically done with Resco?
Yep. So I've been working with the Resco platform now for about 3 years, and I got started when I was at Microsoft in the MCS practice, back when field service was Field 1 and Microsoft was acquiring Field 1. Since then, I've actually used the Resco platform for a lot of different types of projects. Some of them, just completely thinking outside the box. So most of them have been around that whole field technician comes on site and diagnoses some problems and looks at products and runs through all the tests and tasks and think of it as your typical cable service provider comes and installs your cable and your modem and things like that. But I've actually implemented the mobile platform for other areas as well, including organizations, large companies that rent homes. So think of, I can't think of any of the names out there, like American Homes for Rent, I think is one that comes to my mind, where they have their inspectors go out to the homes that they rent, and they take pictures and they run through all the steps of what they need to do. And actually did a really cool project for a government project with mobile, so I can't share too much about it, but that was quite cool as well, that it had to do with the government and asset protection and distributing assets to different individuals and capturing those agreements and things like that. So it's pretty cool.
Right. So, and I've done a lot of the standard mobile app deployments. I wrote a book about it in 2015 that's kind of outdated right now, called Mobile Survival Guide. And in the book, I actually mentioned Resco and some other third-party tools. And I have used Resco and deployed Resco, and not as familiar with it as you are. So this would be good. We can kind of talk about how they stack up, what the key differences are, when you should use the standard app, when you should use the mobile app. So the fact that field service uses Resco, I mean, that was what the Field 1 solution was built on. Is that kind of why we're still on there? Is there any effort you see from Microsoft to move to the standard, what used to be the Mocha app that is now Mocha, but the standard UII app?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's one that a lot of us have been wondering. And at this point in time, I would say no, only because Microsoft. Well, let me reverse that. potentially in the future. I know right now the Resco partnership with Microsoft is quite strong, but we have seen some of the field service components and capabilities already move into the Mocha app, and so there's the potential there. But there's still a lot of things that the Resco app does that right now the standard Microsoft mobile app doesn't provide, and that from a field service perspective and what we see gives it a huge advantage.
Right. I think the metaphor they follow is a little bit different, where the Dynamics 365 mobile app is really supposed to be, using CRM on your phone. And so you can have everything you have in the application for the most part, except for campaign responses and quotes. Basically, everything else is there. And it renders things, especially with the UII, it renders that in the same way as it does in the browser now, which is, I think, fantastic.
Yeah.
But Resco is more the mindset, let's have a different experience on mobile. You can mimic what you do in CRM, but you can have a totally different flow and a totally tailored experience, totally different than what you have in the browser. And I think that's one of the key differences I see between them.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the key differences, and because of that key difference, you have to factor in that development and design time when implementing the field service app, whether it's the Microsoft D365 mobile app or the Resco mobile app. So because it won't take into consideration a lot of those rules, and business rules and things like that we would have in the web UI that would carry down to the mobile, those have to all then be rewritten. But it also gives you that flexibility because maybe it's a different experience for the technicians that are using it.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote a tip of the day back about 6 months ago, tip 961, when you want Resco. And at that time I was kind of surveying I think it started with a conversation with a client around what are the key things where Resco is different, and reevaluating those things. Some of them with V9 are different. So I'll give you the first one was you want a different form for mobile. With 8.2 and before, you had whatever your standard form was. Now we're getting a little bit closer with App Designer, with the ability to have a mobile-specific app module and have a custom form that only shows on mobile. It's simpler. So I think that's one advantage that Resco had that isn't so much a differentiator anymore.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. With the app designer, and then of course with the UUI, I think that's, it's giving it that flair that I think some organizations are looking for, especially from a supportability perspective, right? So maybe they can tailor the mobile to look the same, but they could also then, like you said, with the app designer, potentially do something a little bit different, but still have that similar functionality, so to speak, and the business rules right there at their fingertips without having to potentially rework anything, which is from a timeline perspective is invaluable.
Okay. So let's go to the other one. One that I think still is a plus for Resco is if you're on premises but you don't want to use ADFS and internet-facing deployment. Resco can actually work without IFD.
Correct. Yep. So it can work. It can work without that, and that's one of the from a logging in perspective, I think that's one of its key benefits. And then, of course, once you're in the application and you start using it, or actually even if you look at the setup of it from the actual mobile app, not the administrative setup, but if I'm a user and I want to go ahead and have the capability to set up a specific user experience, it gives a little bit more flexibility for those out in the field, particularly if they're offline. All right, we have a lot of customers that have technicians that are in remote areas. Maybe there's no There's no cell signal. There's no Wi-Fi. They could be working in a basement somewhere. They could be working in a secured facility where they may have to turn things off, and in some cases they're not even allowed to bring in a piece of equipment in, and that becomes a whole moot point. But there's a lot of them out there that, where they are in a particular building, they may not have access to anything. And that's where I think the Resco app, in terms of some of the setup and features and how it flows, seems to work, pretty well.
Yeah. Here's another thing that is a plus in Resco's side is if you need to use one of the entities that are not on mobile. And that list has shrunk, so this isn't as much of a big deal. But core features like sending email from the mobile app. Even in the UUI, you can't send an email from a mobile app. There's also things like connections and campaign-related information. Resco, there's no limitation on what you can display. There again, I don't think that's as big of a deal, but there are people who need to see goals or other things that aren't on there, and that could be a value.
Yeah, it definitely has that flexibility there, and that is depending on the organization and their usability of the mobile platform. That could sway certain organizations one way or the other. One of the nicest features that I like with the Resco app is they have this setup function. It's called Change List, and if I'm working offline, before I sync, I can actually see a list of all the records and items that I've changed before I sync it. So that's kind of a nice little feature, and that's actually only available in the Resco mobile CRM. It's not even available in the Microsoft Dynamics 365 Field Service mobile app. So that's so there are some variations even between the two, even though the Dynamics, the Microsoft app, is pretty much built on the Resco platform. There are still some variations there.
Now, just to be clear, the Microsoft Field Service app, not the Microsoft Dynamics 365 standard mobile app. That's not
Correct.
built on Resco.
Yeah, the Field Service one. And that's a good point, because the Resco mobile CRM app itself doesn't necessarily have to be field service. Yes, we think of it a lot of times for field service because it has that same look and feel, and that's kind of been a lot of the bread and butter. But part of what Resco, and we had Ivan Stansko on the other day on At Your Service talking about Resco
That's actually
mobile.
coming up tomorrow.
There you go. So it'll be published tomorrow, and we spoke about all the different use cases of Resco Mobile outside of field service. But the question, like you said, becomes which one do you want to use, the Microsoft standard mobile or Resco? And I think it's going to come down. It comes down to business case, really.
Right, and I think the other big piece that's standard in Resco that isn't possible just out of the box is mapping, and the mapping to the level that the Resco app will do with geocoding and GPS integration. That's something that makes it ideal for the field service technician using it to route to jobs and stuff.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one. We get a lot of customers and their users that love the map function and can pinpoint right on the map, where their next work order is, and they can see the details. And then it lends itself to things like Glimpse integration. So if you wanted to, when a technician is on their way, it can send a link to the customers to say, hey, track my technician and see where he is, and kind of like an ETA of when he'll arrive. I had customers that used to refer to that as the Domino Tracker app.
Oh yeah, like,
when's my pizza going to be here? So, this is like, hey, if Domino's can do it, can't Microsoft do it? And I was like, yes, well, actually, we can.
Yeah, and that's where I think you gotta weigh those benefits. The biggest downside of Resco is you got to pay for it, where you have Dynamics and you've got to factor in the time to configure it, because you're not just going to pull up your CRM. You're going to need to open Woodford and configure a mobile specific form if you want to change just the basic vanilla configuration.
Yeah, I mean, that is correct. So you have to factor all of that in, and all of that has a cost, whether it's the app itself and And of course, if you're on field service and you have mobile users, that's all handled through Microsoft. But it's still time, right? We need to contact Microsoft to provision X amount of users for Resco and all the environments. And then you also have to have the time to design and build all of that and test that functionality. And that needs to be factored into your timeline and into your budget.
Well, I would say look at what your users need to do, because it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's not uncommon for us to say the salespeople need Resco because they need X, Y, and Z advanced feature. But the sales manager, he needs to see some dashboards and be able to pull up opportunities. He can use that out of the box mobile. And the salespeople, they need the Resco, and so we'll only license it for the salespeople that are in the field and need it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I would use the Resco app for those that need those advanced functions and features that Resco can provide, and then look at using the Microsoft out of the box standard mobile app for these other users, because there really can be, in a lot of these cases, a hybrid approach to mobility.
Right. So let's shift a little bit. On the topic of V9 mobile and what's changed, I was thinking of what's some advice we used to give people on 8.2 and before, specific to mobile deployment, that doesn't really apply anymore. I made a little list here. Maybe you got some ideas, but the one that jumps out at me is the sitemap. Since the menu is the same now, It has the areas and follows the same logic with the show hide. The big hassle of 8.2 mobile was you had to make sure it was rendering correctly and everything in the settings would show up. Now it follows that, and with App Designer you can get exactly the menu you want. Yeah. So that's one thing.
I was not a big fan. I always in terms of the 8.2 and before mobile, I mean it was great for if you needed to use it, but I always thought, it's like, man, it would be really nice if I could just get it to be where it is in the web UI, so I don't have to deal with all of this stuff. So in some cases, and that was a big frustration that I heard quite a bit with the user community in terms of adoption and things like that. They'd say, forget it, I'd rather just go onto my laptop and use a hotspot or whatever and see the full breadth and capability versus using it on my phone or my tablet.
Right. And also, testing, my advice about testing has changed too, because the fact that you can open up the UUI app module in a browser more easily and test it there takes a little bit of pressure off, having to resync a mobile device and test it. Mm-hmm. Now, I do think you still want to smoke test it on whatever types of devices you're going to be using, because you will still see some difference looking at the form factor of a phone versus an iPad, but it's much more consistent than it was.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the things, you bring up testing, which is a great point, because there's so many. I mean, with Apple, of course, it's a little bit different, right? They're pretty standardized in terms of their releases. Yes, you have your different, you have your Apple 10, which will run differently than an 8 and an 8 Plus and things like that. But you have a standard operating system. The screen size may be different. But for example, with Android, there's so many different operating systems and so many different platforms that, and especially if you're an organization that's a BYOD organization and you're supporting all those, it can become quite daunting. So my recommendation is always to say, okay, we're test on a standard list, and because there's no way you could test on everything, especially if it comes to Android.
Yeah, for sure. So, what is your take on deploying mobile to Android versus iOS, whether it's Resco or its standard app? My experience has been the fact that Android has so many different variants that it's just a little bit more complicated to make sure that you have a great experience on Android. Yeah,
I always cringe, to be honest, when they say, "Oh, we use Android devices and they're all different kinds and operating systems." It really makes it quite difficult to provide that what I like is a good customer experience and a usability experience. I think it becomes quite difficult to manage all of that. If it could be standardized, that would be great. But I know that's part of I think some of the attraction. If you're an Android user, you like to have that flexibility with, going from different devices, and there's different operating systems. Personally, I'm an Apple guy, and I like that. At least I know, okay, it's iOS, say 6 and higher is supported, and then you just have to worry about the screen size in terms of, is it an iPad, is it an iPad Pro, is it a mini, so on and so forth. That becomes at least a little bit more manageable.
Yeah, I'm with you. I am currently an iOS user. I don't consider myself an iOS guy. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. LaFonte, but you are a Google Home guy, too.
I am a Google Home guy.
Wouldn't that go better with an Android phone?
I don't know. It probably would. And
you don't want to totally sell out to one tech behemoth. You want to.
That's right.
Enslave yourself to both.
I have to spread the wealth. Actually, the Google Home works extremely well with all of my devices in my house, my alarm system, my garage door. So until Apple or someone else comes out with that and says, "Hey, it works just as good," I'm sticking with Google.
Yeah, I got you. But I tell you what, I do occasionally have pangs where I think about switching to Android the next time I'm up for renewal, or replacement, I should say, because the whole battery slowing down thing, and also I see things that some of my weird Android friends can do, like Matthew Anderson, and you can do delayed text message sending on Android, and I would love to do that, and there's no way to do that with iOS.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you know what? And I've had an Android before. I did switch. This was several years ago, and it was very hard for me to kind of embrace it, only because if your whole family has Apple and you're the only Android user, it becomes a little bit cumbersome to navigate that path, especially when you're trying to see your kids' calendars. You can't do it. But and then I also had, back in the day when I was at Microsoft, I joined the Windows Phone community for a very short period of time until all of my apps started disappearing.
I was there. I had a Windows Phone for about 4 years. So I miss my live tiles sometime, but I've gotten over it because my iPhone has as many Windows or Microsoft apps as my Windows Phone ever did.
Exactly. So I do spread the wealth. I have my Surface. So I have my new Surface Pro, and I have my Apple phone, and I have my Google Home. So I spread the wealth a little bit.
Yeah, and the thing about mobile CRM, we've talked about Resco, and we talked about the Dynamics app, but really mobile Dynamics experience goes a lot broader than that, especially if you use the Outlook app and can use that, because with V9, there's very few things you can't do or start to do with the Outlook app, including searching records, including looking at relationship insights. So, even if you don't want to run a Dynamics app, and there are some people that don't want to pull up an app, the fact that you have in the Outlook app the ability to search for records, it's just becoming more ingrained, which I think is the way it should be. It shouldn't be, I'm going to use CRM now. I know the way Microsoft wants to be is fully ingrained in voice assistants and all this stuff. And so the more that happens, just the more seamlessly people will be able to use the platform.
Yeah, and I definitely see that more. I mean, I think those of us that have been using and implementing Dynamics now for quite some time, we've seen this evolution, right? And the more ingrained things are getting, more and more ingrained and intertwined. So now there's groups within there. There's been OneDrive for a while now, and SharePoint, and then now we have the Outlook app being, V9 being a lot more robust. And for users that spend the majority of their time in Outlook for whatever reason, God bless them. I try to limit my time in Outlook. That may be the way to go for them. So, this way it doesn't limit to a specific, now you can tailor to all the different types of users. Oh, I have ones that want to use it on the mobile. I want ones that want to use it on the web UI. I want to use Outlook. You have all of that flexibility now where, even with the Outlook app in the past, it was still kind of limited. You could do quite a bit, but it wasn't, all inclusive. And just occasionally people would be like, I can't see this. And you had to train them a little bit differently. So we're starting to see a lot more transparency, I think.
Yeah, you're just saying that because you haven't listened to our podcast from yesterday about how to optimize your Outlook. You do that, your Outlook will run like a dream, and then you won't hate it. Anyway, well, this has been good. Maybe this is something we could do once every couple months, just to update everybody, because mobile's a fast changing thing, and as we have updates to V9, I'm sure that things will be changing with field service. So, let's get back together maybe in a month or two and catch up on mobile at that time.
Definitely, yeah, and I think there'll be a lot of interesting news that comes out of the Resco conference in March. So hopefully by then we'll have some good insight into what is even changing in the field service mobile side as well. And I know our good friend Ben Vollmer has a couple sessions. So Ben, I know we're competing against you, Shawn and I, for a session. Watch out. Everyone's coming to our session.
So is the Resco conference just about the Resco platform in general, or is it specific to the Microsoft side of things? There are a lot of field service stuff there along with Resco content?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of it's Resco, it's Microsoft, and it's just field service and mobility in general. So some of it is going to be trends within the mobility area and what's coming up with Resco. Then there'll be some stuff on Microsoft, and I even believe because Resco does a little bit with Salesforce. Boo. I think there'll be one or two sessions on there as well, how it works with some of the other platforms.
Would somebody who doesn't use field service mobile, but maybe is looking at field service or considering mobile, would they benefit from the conference?
I absolutely. If you're thinking of field service and you're thinking about mobility for your technicians, definitely this would be a conference to come to. It's 2 days. It's the 14th and 15th of March in Atlanta. You can go to Resco.Next&nbsp and see all the details, all the sessions and the agenda. And it should be a really good conference. I'm looking forward to it.
This has been CRM Audio, the Dynamics 365 podcast, with Business Solutions MVPs George Dubinsky, Joel Lindstrom, and Shawn Tabor. This podcast is a production of Dynamic Podcasts, LLC. Follow us on Twitter at CRM Audio. Subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, or any place else that fine podcasts are available. You can email us at voice@crm.audio with questions or topic suggestions.